Well, good afternoon. So let me get started here. I do have about 15 minutes. My name is Rishi Agrawal. I'm the co-founder and CEO at TeamLease Regtech. Some really interesting conversations since morning. And one very unique thing I found, there were a couple of speakers on the podium, Venkat in particular, who used compliance as a word more often than others. Now, most of the people came either from pharma companies or logistics companies. Interestingly, I don't come from either, but I come from a company that actually works with both those industries in order to help them stay on the right side of the law. Today, in about 15 minutes that I have, I will speak about us understanding and appreciating the complexity of the compliance framework in India. What does it take to stay on the right side of the law? What are the key challenges that affect pharma and logistics companies? And how should corporate India, particularly this industry, should start focusing on digitally transforming their compliance? So with that, let me quickly get started. Here's a quick slide that talks about informal economy of India. If you see this, India has a whopping 63 million enterprises, out of which about 12 million are registered for indirect taxes, about 1 million are registered for social security. Out of 1 million, about 500,000 pay social security. 70,000 companies have revenues of over 5 crores. 22,000 or 23,500 have a paid up share capital of more than 10 crores. And only 8,000 or so among them are actually listed companies. And one of the key reasons of this, where we have created a large number of economic dwarfs in the economy, is over the last 75 years, we like to call it regulatory cholesterol that has ailed our economy, which is basically, to start a company, to run a company, to manage a company, and to put it to bed. All of that requires a phenomenal amount of regulatory intervention at times. And this is one of the key reasons why the country has so many economic dwarfs. 63 million enterprises translate into only about 8,000 listed companies. And we'll get into how to deal with this. Here's a quick infographic that we put out about 3 years ago, which encapsulates the size of India's regulatory ecosystem. And by the way, pharma and logistics are both covered right here. Just in case you're wondering, this does not affect you. So there are about 1,536 acts and rules in the country. Subsumed in them are about 69,233 unique compliances across the law of the land, broken down into 7 broad categories, and there are about 6,618 unique filings across the country. If you look at this, it's broken down into 7 categories led by labor. Labor laws are on the concurrent list of the Constitution, 30% in terms of acts, 47% in terms of compliance, and a whopping 68% in terms of employer criminality comes from the labor laws, and it affects both pharma and logistics companies. Everybody in the country who uses resources have to deal with labor laws, and that's a big, complex subject, concurrent subject on the Constitution. EHS stands for Environment, Health and Safety, deals with Environment Protection Act of 1986, solid waste management, plastic waste management, e-waste management, hazardous waste management, air, water, soil pollutions, disposal of biomedical waste, and many other items are covered as a part of the EHS. Many CPCB, PCB, which is Pollution Control Board, and their regulations affect them. Finance and taxation, I think, is self-explanatory. Deals with direct tax, indirect tax, customs, FEMA, advanced tax, income tax, GST, many other kind of taxes go there. Commercial deals with equipments, hoists, lifts, cranes, pressure vessels, boilers, tools, tackles, weights, measurements, fire extinguishers. I'm sure some of these names ring a bell in your minds. Both pharma and logistics are big beneficiaries of commercial category of compliances. You use these extensively, and a lot of regulations that you will see come from there. Secretarial is company law, SEBI, NSE, BSE, all kinds of event-based compliances, time-based, event-based, checklisted, and so on and so forth. They sit there. And industry-specific is the category which affects the industry-specific regulator, whether it's a drug regulator or any other regulator of the industry, it falls there. So this is the large framework of the law. These are the 7 broad categories, and let's look at what these are translate into in terms of compliances. So if you see, compliances are largely broken down into licenses, registrations, permissions, various kinds of consent orders, returns, registers, challans, payments, remittances, creation of various kinds of committees, their operations, displays, exemptions. These are all examples of statutory compliances that a typical company, whether you're in pharma side or logistics side, you'll deal with a multitude of these ranging into a few hundred to a few thousand depending on the size of your organization. Here's a quick infographic that actually encapsulates the number of compliances applicable to a company. We've broken them down into four kinds or three sizes of the company: small, medium and large, with some assumptions in there. And if you see, a small company deals with about 750 compliances, and in one of the subsequent slides we've done this modeling for pharma. And for pharma manufacturing, an MSME in pharma with a single business, single entity, single state operation with one manufacturing plant deals with 998 compliances right there. This company typically deals with one filing every second business day. Now, as the size of this company grows, and there were people on the dais, Vikram particularly, who came from Sun Pharma, and their company would typically fall into a medium or a large size company. You will typically deal with about 10,000 compliances in a given year, which translates into about 20 compliances on a business day basis. Such a company also deals with over 150 licenses, deals with about 210 different acts and rules spread across many different states, and hence the complexity of interpreting the act forms and formats and their interpretations, they change dramatically. One other big complexity that comes in is the rate at which regulations change. India is an evolving economy, a lot of things are changing, a lot of new acts are coming in, they affect doing business in the country, a lot of existing forms and formats are changing, the other changes are happening. In a typical year, you deal with anywhere between 5,000 to 8,000 regulatory changes published on 2,233 different websites between union government, state government and local body governments. Now, if you are a pharma company or a logistics company or a convergence of the two, managing operations intersecting with both those sectors, chances are that anywhere between 600 to 1,000 of these regulatory changes will affect you in a given year. There are 250 business days in a year. That translates into about 2 to 4 regulatory changes that affect you. Now, isolating which ones affect you, where they are published, what is the nature of the change. Now, these are the natures of the change. What changes? Introduction of new acts. We see that Data Privacy Act bill has just been tabled and cleared the passage through the upper house and the lower house of the parliament. Similarly, introduction of new acts will result in new compliance obligations, change of forms and format, change of date, one-time extension during COVID. There were a lot of times when extensions were given for a given instance or for a given month of the compliance. Change of penalty, change of duty structure, change of interest calculation, revision to a existing form, change of frequency of a compliance are specific examples of the nature of changes. Now, if you come from any of these industries, chances are that there are between 600 to 1,000 changes that affect you. And if you are a large organization like a DHL and Blue Dart and Adani Airports, and we heard a few large ones on the dais today, the number of changes that will affect you will go into several thousand because you have many different locations. Now, what are the key compliance management challenges in the country? This is not a presentation where I can do a deep dive into specific obligations for a specific type of company, because depending on the nature of the constitution and nature of business that you do, the specific obligation change. But I'm giving you a high level framework. What's the key compliance challenge? One is the complexity. Too many acts, too many returns, registers, challans, too many different forms, formats, too many different ways of calculations. In a small state, there are over 1,000 different permutations and combinations of the minimum wage. Now, chances are that if you don't have the depth of knowledge and expertise and experience, inadvertently you will drift away into the wrong side of the law. Second, there is criminality. I'll give you more details on criminality. Whopping 38% of the compliances in India have criminal provisions leading to jail term. Regulatory environment is highly fluid. We just saw that. and regulatory scrutiny has gone up quite substantially. So that means the number of notices that companies have started to receive has gone up, primarily because government has now gone digital. Government can do data correlation, it can identify defaults, it can identify delays and so on and so forth much better. And last but not the least, and this is an endogenous variable rather than an exogenous one, where most companies today manage their compliance obligations in a highly manual, ad hoc, paper-based and people-dependent program. Most CEOs that I speak to, and I speak to a couple of hundred CEOs in a year, one common question that I have for them is, do you know how many compliances are applicable to your company in a given month? And most of them do not go beyond a number of 100 or 150. And when I share illustrative data with them for their size of the organization, they are shocked, because they didn't even know that there are 500 or 1,000 compliances per month that their organization is dealing with. So one important thing here is ignorance of the law is not an excuse for non-compliance. So if you are a business head, if you are a function head, and if you're responsible for a function, chances are ignorance cannot be touted as a way or a reason why you are on the wrong side of the law. This is a report that I had co-authored last year. It's titled Jailed for Doing Business. It's available on the internet. If you would like, certainly take a read. It's a 109-page report. It's a data-driven dissection of the entrenched criminality and jail term in India's regulatory environment, where we highlight that 2 out of every 5 unique compliances in the country carry imprisonment clauses. 50% of these are in the business environment have clauses. So out of 1,536 acts and rules, about 800 plus have imprisonment clauses. 3 out of every 5 imprisonment clauses prescribe a jail term of more than 1 year. 68% of these clauses are from the labor laws. So imagine the 68% criminality that I was telling you comes from the labor laws, and nearly half these clauses among labor laws are from the Factories Act of 1948, and Factories Act is applicable to all the pharma manufacturing companies in the country. 5 states, some of the key industrialized states, including the current state of Maharashtra, Tamil Nadu, Gujarat, Punjab, and so on, they have more than 1,000 clauses for criminality, and we are happily sitting here not even realizing that a lot of these laws, contraventions actually have criminal provisions. Directors, independent directors, board members, KMPs can technically go to jail if they drift away on the wrong side of the law. Now here, let me go into the pharma sector. Here's a model of data for a pharma company. A single entity, single corporate office and single factory deals with about 998 compliances in a year. Now, this pharma company, if there are about 5 plants, they'll deal with about 5,500 compliances depending on the specific nature of the operation. And if it's a large pharma company with about 10 plants or more, the number of compliance obligations range between 10 and 20,000 depending on the specific nature of things that they are doing. Now, these are broken down into the 7 broad categories that we spoke about. Such a company deals with about 85 unique acts and rules, with 58 central and 27 state-based rules, 998 total compliances, and about 70 unique licenses they are responsible for. This is the list of some of the key approvals. Obviously, the laundry list goes up to about 70. I've bifurcated them into some municipal laws where, trade licenses of various kinds, water connections, permanent sewage connections, electricity connections, and so on and so forth are there. And then under the Drugs and Cosmetic Act of 1940 and the corresponding rules, there are a number of them. And then the labor law registration, there is an illustrative list. I'll be happy to give you the entire list. Please connect with us offline and help you in more ways than one. But this is just an illustrative list. I'm sure everybody here is familiar with pharma logistics. I'll skip this slide, but the focus here is not just manufacturing, but procurement and transportation of the raw material all the way through finished product, through multimodal transport systems, including sea freight, air freight, overland, and so on and so forth, integrated logistics. Here, there are quite a few acts. Don't intend to go through them. They are on the presentation. It will be shared with all of you. You can take a look. These are some of the key acts and the corresponding rules, including clinical trials rules, good manufacturing practices, plastic waste management, legal metrology, packaged commodities rules, numeration rules under the legal metrology, state-specific regulations in legal metrology and Bureau of Indian Standards are some higher-level industry-specific regulations under which large number of compliances come in, and specifics change basis what you actually deliver. Similarly, the Central Drug Standards Control Organization is the primary regulator. There are some important items there. These are illustrative list of different drugs and their required storage conditions with temperature conditions. Most of you are very familiar with that, but when it translates into a specific level of compliance, how does it get managed and how does it get reported and what kind of paperwork is required? That's what our product does. So we basically digitize the compliance management in the country. There are import and export regulations which have a sizable number of regulations. I don't intend to walk you through the specific regulations here, but all kinds of licenses and certifications, including the Importer-Exporter Code, temperature and storage requirements under the Drugs and Cosmetics Act, construction and functional requirements of insulated vans and refrigerated vans. WHO guidelines are there, operational guidelines for specified by the manufacturer of drug, and NOC by DCGI and so on and so forth, including the customs clearances is there. Now, while I have given you input on the pharma company, here is a quick view of the logistic company with the single corporate office, single entity and one warehouse. As you can see, the number of acts are about 107 and there are about 648 total compliances applicable for running a single warehouse. Now, if this warehouse has cold storage facilities and stuff like that, the number of compliances can go up quite substantially. We had done the modeling and about 850 odd compliances for a refrigerated warehouse is what came out. About 84 licenses are required for such a warehouse. Now, when you are into pharmaceutical logistics, depending on specifically which part of the value chain are you in, the specific applicability will change. What kind of drug, what regulation, where is it getting procured from, what kind of method is being used, which country is it coming from, what kind of import regulations are there, and so on and so forth. So definitely the lower level specifics depends on stuff. Now, how does accidental non-compliance happen? One of the biggest reason is missed dates. There are thousands of dates. Inadvertently, anybody in your organization can miss a date, and that's how an accidental non-compliance can happen for licenses renewal. Maintenance of records in specific formats. Forms and formats are an important part. There are a few thousand forms and formats. Just to give you a number, over 3,000 forms and formats just for labor, and they keep changing every so often. So if you don't stay on top of a particular form in a particular category, chances are you are maintaining a record but in the wrong format as per the prescribed format, and non-compliance will happen. Lack of awareness of all the ongoing compliances, various kinds of display compliances, various kinds of ongoing compliances are there. The lack of awareness is there because compliance becomes an accidental assignment to most of the people. Nobody gets hired to do compliance as their primary job, and hence oftentimes they will lack the awareness. Missed regulatory changes. We spoke about a few thousand regulatory changes published across over 2,233 websites. That's a big problem right there. Introduction of new laws. You constantly have to watch out for what new regulations are coming out and what are the implications of those regulations on your business, and understand them, apply them, divide them into activities, convert them into actionables, and hence make sure that there are people in your organization who are tagged to them. And then inaccurate calculations of statutory liabilities and interest, because the formula may have changed, calculation logic may have changed, but you're still doing it based on an old formula. That's another problem. And poor oversight for overall compliance, corporate compliance program, where once in a blue moon somebody wakes up from their slumber and starts looking for a compliance update, and unfortunately compliance doesn't work like that. If you have a real sizable business, please understand that compliance is a full-time role and it needs a lot of tools, techniques and people to manage it. What is the way forward for the country? I think three-vector framework of rationalize, digitize and decriminalize is the way forward. We recently saw a Jan Vishwas bill with 42 different acts being decriminalized with about 183 different compliance line items. That's an example of decriminalize. We have done a lot of data-driven dissection in our report titled Jailed for Doing Business. Please pick a copy and read. Rationalize is where there is a lot of duplication, overlap and redundancy in our laws. Labor laws particularly being a case in point. There are over 10 registers just for the register for wages in 10 different acts, and the new labor code has done a good job of rationalizing some of this, but that's only labor laws. This rationalization needs to continue to happen in other areas as well. And digitize, Digital India program as well as I do. Digital payments has led the way for the country, and a lot of digitization is happening across compliance domain as well, including National Open Compliance Grid for end-to-end straight-through filing of documents straight away from a Regtech system to a a Government of India system where the entire journey of data will be faceless, presenceless, and cashless. So those are some ideas. Unfortunately, 15 minutes is not enough for us to have a detailed conversation on the subject of compliance, but I thought at least I'll paint a high-level view and a framework so that you can start thinking about whether you have the right people, process, and platform to manage the life cycle of all the applicable compliances as you are busy scaling your businesses within the domestic boundaries of India and outside globally. Thank you.